What's up, y'all? ifeigle, FLOWTOX. Out here running in Chicago. On the backside of north side Chicago hospital, which my daughter was born, in which yesterday I tried to go get my annual checkup and showed up and I had no reported appointment with my doctor. It's just complete confusion. And it's just sort of a reassurance of the shit show that our healthcare system is in right now. And the quality of care patients have access to. And how 45 disproportionately undermines the quality of his care. The inequality is real, and that certain populations are allowed to keep healthy while others aren't. It's a meritocracy, unfortunately. Unfortunately, our access to medicine is not a right. Our access to health or healthy environments is not a right. Anyways. Infinite Jest, David Foster Wallace's perhaps magnum opus, tome of a work of fiction, tome of a work of postmodern, post-industrial fiction of disassociated people living in a disassociated world. Well, Infinite Jest was, it's trending on Twitter. Once again, holding the author's readers accountable for perhaps the wrongdoings of the author. David Foster Wallace has well been outed for his sexual misconduct against peers of his, fiction writer colleagues, in which he has stalked and intimidated a fellow female writer that he knew during his lifetime. I forget her name, unfortunately. But seeing as that David Foster Wallace has been effectively canceled posthumously, that his readers are also now accountable for that as well, which is a tough thing. It goes in all directions. It goes with R. Kelly, it goes with Michael Jackson, it goes with David Foster Wallace, it goes with... Name any great artist before the 20th century who wasn't held up by misogynistic relationships, economically misogynistic relationships. In which like great epic poets like John Milton dictated his, Paradise Lost to his daughters in the last years of his life as he was blind and could not write himself. The writing of that poem relies on the pressure put on to the daughter to work for pursuits not of her own. So I'm not justifying any of it, but it is a fact. We lived in the patriarchy for a very long time. The whole Western world has been dominated by misogynistic ideals and institutions that have built up the framework of the patriarchy. And men, great artists of the past, the majority of whom have been men, were propped up by the women and the free labor they were provided by coercing their supposed superiority upon supposed inferiors, women and people of color, and even just those who are just held down economically despite color or sex or gender or sexuality, any of it. But that needs to be recognized, but also the thought put forth needs to be addressed as well and readjusted to then include everyone into that picture. But the trends on Twitter that I see over Infinite just rarely get into that discussion. I feel like I just saw it was a TikTok video of some girl just acting like the audience of certain books, Philip Roth, David Foster Wallace, I forget others. And it's whatever. But Infinite Jest and the topics brought up by David Foster Wallace, not only in Infinite Jest, but in many of his essays, I think many of which are found in Consider the Lobster, deal with our addiction to technology, deal with our lack of connection and our desire and our unsatiated search for connection through technology and media. I mean, most of the plot of Infinite Jest is surrounded by the dissemination of terroristic drone-like media by separatist forces in Quebec. And this being what is called, I believe, the media, what is it? I forget what it's called. But this particular file, this particular piece of video art has an enrapturing effect in which those who watch it cannot draw their attention away from the screen ever and die lapsing in the glory of the video being projected in front of them. I should say spoiler alert, but fuck you. Anyone who hasn't read or has disregarded Infinite Jest. Much of David Foster Wallace's thought was directed directly at our consumption of media and our self-consciousness placed onto it, and aspects of voyeurism and misogyny and objectification of the people and things we see on the screen. Allows us to escape the true reality of what it's like to actually sit with ourselves and be with ourselves, and to address boredom, and to address our minds, and to address ourselves, actually. I think that's a lot of what DFW faced, David Foster Wallace faced, was the confrontation of his mind. And I think that's what we all have to face, is the products of David Foster Wallace's mind. But it is acutely representational of the postmodern world we are entering. Thinking back to Infinite Jest, how the use of video calls in its timeline was prevalent. But as people started to video themselves and talk to each other in real time, screen to screen, camera to camera, people grew increasingly more self-conscious of their image online, of their image being transferred, of what represented them on the internet. And granted, this book was published in 1996, Infinite Jest. Much before the time of video conference calls, of our Zoom age here. Where video calling is prevalent. And although we don't have complete puppet mock-ups of the most idealized version of ourselves made, to which we then prop up in front of the camera in place of our own selves, we have visual filters, we have Photoshop on the go, we have the ability to characterize or caricature, sexualize, modify ourselves by squeezing two fingers together, by dragging a finger across your nose. Your whole image can be replaced. And I think David Foster Wallace addressed many of these issues before we ever took them seriously. We thought of them as a joke. I mean, I didn't read Infinite Jest until maybe 2010, 2 years after David Foster Wallace's suicide. And there was probably a new hype around the book in the years following his suicide, and which led to me reading it. Because I was a 7th grader, and I was a 6th grader, and I was in middle school in 1996. Not even, man. So, I mean, David Foster Wallace was writing this before I mean, before instant messenger was the phenomena that it was, before MySpace was, before Facebook came on the scene in 2005. And David Foster Wallace saw us being enraptured by media and video technology, the threat it presented to our self-awareness, our mental health, our cultural health. So I think it's somewhat ironic that the author who criticized perhaps our postmodern approach to video technology and video consumption most is now trying to be taken down by people who fall a victim to the very worries that David Foster Wallace wrote about. Young men, young women growing up with the ability to shape themselves in the virtual realm however they want. And close to, plastic surgery is not a declining industry. Body modification, all of it can lead to a sense of isolation even from ourselves, a sense of body dysmorphia, a sense of unacceptance, all types of feelings that we will soon have to come to terms with. It will be a health crisis. Just like I once heard the analogy of, now that there's sort of been a food revolution and thinking about how people eat and what we consume and how it affects our health, after decades of Americans eating processed food and processed cheese and processed dairy, and the rise in obesity and cancer and heart disease and diabetes rates skyrocketing along with them, we learn to recommend a better diet. But soon we will come to face the lack of nutrition we find in our mental diet and what we consume in the media. And after decades of poor consumption patterns, we will have to come to reckon with the health problems that will arise with them, being depression, being body dysmorphia, being all types of other issues that, I can't even name, but I would like to discuss furthermore, because I face it myself with my own media consumption and want to try to become more aware of what I consume, because I see its own effects on my own mental state. So I do think it's true. Diet, you gotta worry about your physical diet, but you also have to worry about your mental diet, what you eat mentally. Eat it raw. Eat everything raw. Unprocessed. Unproduced. Unedited. Untrimmed. Straight linear media. Anyways, I think I've said all I wanted to say on David Foster Wallace. I do have Infinite Jest on my bookshelves. I have read it. I've attempted to reread it several times. But it's as a writer myself, as a thinker myself, I find it very oppressing. And I find it very stifling. Although it is bold genius and incredibly insightful into themes of addiction and tennis and film and optics and media consumption. It's completely genius, but one always attempts to compare oneself to that DFW's ability to write and ability to express those thoughts, the most difficult of thoughts. Yet, I think maybe David Foster Wallace was perhaps also tortured by his own mind, which led him to write, which led him to try to explain things in the way that he saw things. Even in reading Infinite Jest, I've attempted to read Pale King multiple times as well, but I can't help to not disassociate David Foster Wallace from his characters. I feel like I can't help but project him into what he is talking about. And of course, you know, what he is talking about comes from him, but it's such a hard thing for me to separate the art from the artist in David Foster Wallace's when it comes to David Foster Wallace and his work. But I do recognize what he did as a human and the wrong things he has been accused of. And he's not there to defend himself. And I'm not there to defend him either. So, but I do think his fiction, when read, can be very helpful in understanding some of the postmodern ails that we are now seeing the emergence of. Rise of suicide rates, rise of depression, rise of gun violence in schools, rise of corporatism. It's like the whole timeline of Infinite Jest is a subsidized timeline by corporations. The goddamn year of Dove soap. The goddamn year of Dove soap. Anyways, thoughts on DFW. I might go back and try to pick out some snippets and reread some of his stuff. But I mean, there's so much to read. Anyways, still trying to finish that Young book. Thanks for watching. As always, it's ifeigle at FLOWTOX. Subscribe if you'd like. Keep watching if you'd like. Hit me up on Twitter or in the comments if you want to ask me any questions. And thanks for watching. FLOWTOX.